Hi, my name is Damon Brown. I'm an advocate of the non-traditional entrepreneur, the solopreneur, the creator, the person who's making something out of nothing. And we're talking about bringing your worth. Today we're going to talk about Joe Budden, who's a rapper who's now one of the biggest podcasters, arguably in the world. And he just had a conflict recently, this is September of 2020, about working with Spotify. He ended up having an exclusive contract with them, and that was for 2 years. He had an independent podcast. They ended up saying, be exclusive with us, work with us. They said it for 2 years, and now they're trying to re up the contract, Spotify, but he feels like he's being horribly undervalued. One of the things that he said was that he felt as though that he already was a walking proof of concept before Spotify came along. In other words, he was already creating value and had all these listeners before Spotify even put the battery in his back and got the gas going. It was such a fascinating discussion going on, particularly with the YouTube discussion about why he was leaving Spotify. He is not re-upping his contract. I think as of now, he's a free agent, and it's such a smart idea. It reminds me of so many things that happen when we create something out of nothing, which again is the coaching and the books that I write are all talking to all of us who are trying to fulfill our particular vision where it doesn't exist already. And that could be dangerous ground for a few different reasons. First of all, we sometimes end up undervaluing what we do because it ends up being in a box. When we end up doing something, we don't necessarily know how valuable it is to the market. So that ends up translating to us like not charging enough or us doing stuff for free. As I said in a keynote recently, if you're actually not charging for your service and you're doing it pro bono for someone, that's not a benevolent thing. It's actually reflective of you not feeling worthy enough to charge something for it. And if people actually respect and love and the work that you're doing, not you personally, but the product or the service that you're bringing to it, then they'll have no problem actually paying for it. In fact, you don't have to sell to them. They will actually ask you, how much is it? I want it. Let's figure it out. And then you can work backwards from there. So sometimes we don't actually value what we're doing because we're kind of like a fish in water. We don't know we're actually in because we don't actually know what our particular strengths are. And sometimes if we have a superpower or if we're really good at something, we might not be objective enough to realize how valuable it is to the world. The second thing that comes up a lot is worrying about selling out. And Joe Budden talked about this. I love the podcast episode where he talked about this. There's YouTube as well, and it's worth looking up, and I'll give a link to it here. But what he talked about is people worrying about selling out. Jay-Z, who's a colleague slash former boss of his, also a rapper and pretty well known, he talked about this, and I've written about this in my Ink column, where people worry about selling out so much that ends up being kind of like they end up getting it's like being sold a bill of goods where it's like, okay, well, this guy's broke or this gal is broke. So they have to be doing it for the love. And that implies the reverse. If you're getting paid well, then you must not be doing it for the love. And you must not be a true artist. Spotify and other major corporations, not them particularly, but major corporations or even organizations that you work with might kind of play this a little bit if they're not on the up and up. Because artists often, I know I was like this back in the day, are just happy to be published, happy to have a song on the radio, happy to have their dreams fulfilled. And they're not necessarily thinking, and my stuff, my service, my product, my creation is actually worth financial compensation. Because whatever venue you use, whether it's publishing here or getting it out there or, whatever, someone's gaining from that. Not only from the customer with your product or service, but also whatever venues you use, correct? So if you sell something through Amazon, Amazon's getting a cut from that, right? So it's like, why shouldn't you be compensated from that? If you're working with an agent or you're working with a book publisher, as I've done 25 books, if you're working with a traditional book publisher, they're going to be making money on it. So why shouldn't you? So the systems that we use to get our stuff out there, such as Spotify, are making a decent living, if not making a huge profit. We're actually the ones that are, as Jay-Z says, the culture doesn't move without us. We're the ones that are actually creating the culture. So you should be compensated for that and not feel guilt about that. Just because you're not making a whole lot of money, that doesn't make you a pure artist. The starving artist thing is dead. That's over. The last part of it is to actually know your worth, independent of what other people's opinion is, and assume that whatever you're going to do eventually will get the interest of other people, and to know that worth automatically. I'll give you an example. With my app Cuddler, I co-founded it with two people when I actually became a stay-at-home dad. So that's part of my story. So I became an entrepreneur at the same time I became a stay-at-home dad to my wife and I's first son. At that time, he was 4 months old. So I ended up doing two apps. The second one was called Cuddler, which connected people for hugs. My background is technology and intimacy, so it's right up my alley. Ended up being really big. We had 250,000 users. We were on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. It was an amazing, fun ride. We ended up selling it 11 months after we launched it. Shortly after my son's second birthday, we ended up selling it. So during the beginning of his childhood as an entrepreneur and a stay-at-home dad, it was wonderful. My point is that we created it at our proverbial kitchen tables. And then based on our roles, we ended up divvying up how much of the company we're going to own. And so when the acquisition thing started circling around that second or at the end of the full year of us owning the company, it was just a matter of us discussing who was going to acquire us. And then when we got the check, we just split it up based on that conversation. But those conversations happened before it was worth a dime. Joe Budden talks about this, where his podcast, which again is one of the most popular podcasts in the world, it started with him shooting the stuff with two of his friends. I believe it was two of his friends on the couch. But he had the common sense to set up that structure so when Spotify called, he's able to give a price with them and then have that limited contract for 2 years so that when it was time to re-up, he was like, no, I'm worth way more than that. And able to become, as we speak, a free agent. So understanding your worth means knowing the value of what you're creating. And when you interact with other people, whether it's a customer, a potential partner or acquirer, or even someone that, a VC or someone else to fund your company, then you're able to speak up to that. But first you have to know the value within yourself. And that's such an essential thing. I talk a lot about Joe Budden in a little bit more detail in my Inc. magazine column. You can read it at inkdamonbrown.com, inkdamonbrown.com. Just look up Joe Budden, or you'll probably see it in the front page if you're reading this in September or listening to this in September of 2020. If you want to learn more about taking yourself to the next level and your particular strengths, come through to joindamon.me. It's my weekly newsletter. It's my community. At 5:55 a.m. every Wednesday, I give solid advice, good discussion, links to really powerful articles. And if you end up coming through right now, you'll be able to take my FATE test. That's FATE. That stands for Focus, Agility, Time, and Energy. That's based on my upcoming book. It'll be out on January 28th, 2021. It's called Build From Now: How to Know Your Power, See Your Abundance, and Nourish the World. And it really talks about these 4 strengths and resources that we all have, but they're all at different levels depending on where we're at professionally and personally. If you take my quiz, it'll help jumpstart these ideas. And so when the book comes, you already will be in the mindset to absorb as much as you can. Thank you so much. And for now, be sure to bring your worth always and build from now with whatever you got.